Thanks. Thank you so much for taking time to show up, whether you're watching this live right now or you're going to catch this in the rerun. I want to let you know I do appreciate you taking the time to do so. As usual, let's make some adjustments here and see how things are looking. Yeah, that's looking good. I like that. Everything in frame. That's always nice. I'm a one-man operation. Don't have a team. I'll get to that subject here in a minute. Well, what happened this week? Not much in the gear front. Well, there is the rat pedal. As you know, I had a pretty decent older rat pedal. I couldn't exactly date it because the casing in the back, I couldn't get to it. But it was an interesting pedal to have. I've had a rat before, and I decided to pick one up again and try it out. And I traded two pedals for it, my Fender level buffer and one other one I can't think of right now. And I enjoy the rat pedal. I think it was great, but I found this one to be noisy. They're all generally noisy. And you can put a buffer, of course, a noise gate, in your chain in order to help mitigate that. But I really, as you know, I'm very particular about the pedals that go on my board. Um, they all have to serve a purpose and have a particular sound that I'm trying to achieve with them. Also, they have to play well together. Sometimes when you have pedals, you'll find that when you put them together on a board, they don't all play well together. And in this case, it just was a noisy pedal on a pedal board that had a lot of very low noise pedals on it that are great. So it didn't make the cut in that regard, and that was the reason there. Let me make another adjustment here. We have Ben here. Welcome, Ben. Thank you so much, brother. I always appreciate you taking the time to be here. It wouldn't be a party without Maddie Two Hats. Welcome. Blues fan, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to show up, fellas. We'll warm up a little bit with this diatribe while we're waiting for others to join into the live chat. Um, yeah. I just wasn't. It just didn't make the cut. There's different criteria, and low noise plays well with the others. Things of that nature are something that you know I absolutely demand out of the gear that I have on that pedal board. And so it didn't make the cut, and what I'm going to do is try to trade it back for my Fender level set buffer. I have to be honest with you guys, that pedal, that Fender level set buffer, not very expensive. You can get them for under $100. But I found it to be an immeasurable tool actually on my pedal board. Um, I If I used it on the album, it would be one of the last tracks, like Mr. Sun, for example, was one of the last tracks I did. I do believe that was the last track. And so I used it on that, and I really like some of the sounds because you can dial in frequencies with it, not just act as a level set buffer between different guitars that you're switching on stage. Does that great. But being able to dial in frequencies, dial out a little bit of the mids, dial in a little bit more. It's not EQ. It's a little bit better than that, in my opinion. And also the fact that it had a switch on it where it would act with the same kind of load that you would find if you plugged into a tube amp. And I found that to be, or a solid state amp, an amp. And I found that to be just, great too, because it gave a nice little oomph, a little lift. It's just one of those things that gives you a little lift, just like the Blues Breaker, just like the Klon. It's just another one of those pedals that give a little boost, whether it was intended to do that or not. It's always a pleasant surprise to find one that does it and does it pleasantly. And so I'm going to get that pedal back. It's a little short of this long story that I'm telling here tonight. I miss it. I'm sorry I traded it, and wasn't sorry about the Rat. The Rat's a great pedal. It always has, always will be. and I'll find one. They're all different. They're like snowdrops, man. They were mass produced, so you're gonna find some that are a little bit better put together than others. Again, you're gonna get that Monday pedal, or you're gonna get that Friday pedal. And I think that this one was like a Thursday pedal. And so for that, I have to say that I'm not sorry to if I can make the trade. I haven't done it yet. I haven't spoken to it. It was a shop, and I know my pedal is still there. So hopefully he'll make that trade with me back again. I don't see any reason why not, but you never know. But either way, I can't do without that Fender level set buffer pedal. Again, very inexpensive, really cheap. You can get them for, like I said, under $100, $90. But if you're playing strats like I am these days, I think that that's a tool that really does make a difference in your overall tone. It really can. So there's that. Well, I had a very quiet week, as I was saying. Um, I am feeling better. Things are looking up, and that's always a good thing. I hope that is the same with you guys out there. Uh, Tonight's subjects will vary. There's no single thread through any of these. Maybe I'll find something there. But they are things that came across my mind this week. As usual, I make my show notes well in advance, and I start thinking on Monday about what I'm going to talk about that Sunday coming up. And sometimes nothing comes up, sometimes a lot of things come up, and sometimes different things come up that are interesting to me, but don't necessarily all tie together, which is something I usually try to do, try to make it interesting. But we're going to have story time tonight, too. So a little bit later on in this live stream, we're going to be delving into the darker side of the music or industry, or as I call it, the slime pit from hell. So hang in for that. That's going to be coming up. But I want to get into the main topic of the title of this tonight, the third wave of guitar channels. So I want to talk about that subject first. Because, first of all, I've been doing YouTube, a solid YouTube channel now, for about 5 or 6 years. I was putting up stuff a little bit before that, but I would say, yeah, about 6 years, my 6th year now, I do believe. And I did this channel with the starting premise that I didn't want to have any social media kind of tie-ins. I didn't want to go onto my Facebook page to tie into this and to tie into that. I didn't want to do any of those things. I wanted it to grow organically through the medium of just YouTube. I always viewed YouTube not as social media per se. I view YouTube like, I don't know if any of you guys are old enough. Maybe I'm reaching back. But I recall back in the 70s and 80s in Southern California, I'm sure it was there. I know it was everywhere else. Because they kind of parody it in that 70s show. But they had these local cable channel like half-hour shows that you could go on, and if you could produce a half-hour program, you could go on and do these shows. And some of them were great. Some of them became legendary and eventually David Letterman, I do believe, started out. Some talk show hosts started out on that kind of medium, just a local small, like Wayne's World. They have it in that movie, if you're familiar with that. Just a local cable, thing that you can get a little time on, and if you can put together, again, like I said, a show, then of varying degrees of of talent needed in order to do a good one, and it certainly displayed in a lot of them that there was none there. But some of them were brilliant, and some of them really allowed the person to parlay into something bigger. So I always viewed YouTube that way. I always saw it like that, you know. And so, yeah, I never did the social media thing. I never did, you know, I never, I mean, I have an Instagram. I did it for a little while, but I just, you know, it was just too much trouble. I had a few others, but I didn't want to try to reach out and gain an audience by doing that kind of dance. I just wanted to put out good material, solid stuff, interesting stuff, and take that if you build it, they shall come kind of philosophy with this channel. And it's been slow, but we're starting to gain some traction here in the last 6 years, 5, 6 years. Some channels out of the gate, they're smoking with 3, 4, 5, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. I suspect a lot of those have strong social media ties that they do. And yeah, that's one way of doing it. And the other thing is also a lot of them have really great production values coming out of the box. A lot of them don't. And I'm talking about the third wave YouTubers. I should explain that I consider the first wave of YouTubers of guys like Phil McKnight, China Guitar Skeptic Mike, may he rest in peace, and guys like that who have been around for 15, you know, more than a decade, going, you know, well into their second decade on YouTube. And those were the first wave guys. Quite a few of them. Pete Thorne, you know, guys like that. And the second wave, I would say, are the guys who are under 10 years, between 5 to 10 years, and that would be the guys like me. And then the third wave are the ones that I consider 5 years or newer. And it's a funny thing how the new channels are a good way to explore the changing face of the gear industry. A lot of them are, you know, guys, older guys, and their sets that they're backing shots. You know, so, you know, sometimes, you know, it's like, dude, don't you want to clean your house up before you put up a video on YouTube? Please, you know, please clean up the background, do something like that. And then there's some guys who just have fantastic lighting, production values, everything out the box. I've taken a very come what may attitude and just recently started to invest in more lights and different things to produce videos with. So there is, now that I have an audience, I think the best thing for me to do is try to up my game. I think that that would also draw other people. So that is the plan going into the year, and I've been inspired by the third wave of YouTube guys. I'm sure you guys know who they are. A lot of them have very low subscriber. They're under 1,000 right now. A lot of them. There's a lot of new guitar gear orientated channels that have started out, and a lot of them are under 1,000. And these are definitely third wave guys. And so if you come across a channel that you like and you find informative and you think, okay, this guy doesn't have a box of Pampers, you know, half tore open in the background laying on the unmade bed, then, you know, hit the like button and subscribe to him, help him out. I am very glad to see that this is not a dying medium. It's encouraged. The point of this is to say that I'm encouraged by it. Because for a while I thought, you know, the gear thing was starting to taper off. I've seen some data that somewhat supported that. But much like a resurgence of rock music, I remain hopeful that a new generation will come about, and these are starting to bear fruit, starting to come forth. And it's encouraging to see. Again, I'm always like, well, wow, how did this guy get to 60,000? But again, like I said, they have all the boxes ticked. Their production values are good. Mickey, good evening, sir. Welcome, welcome. Glad to have you here. So there's that. So I just thought that a lot of people, especially in the current economic climate, people really don't want to hear too much about gear. As a matter of fact, I will say that I pointed out, and several people now are pointing out that the sales of guitars and have slowed, and the secondary market has really, really, really slowed. So there's that. And so, as a reflection of that, uh, people I don't think are, I mean, they're still interested in watching gear videos, but I think not of the really pricey stuff. I think if you are a channel that featured pricey stuff and you had a good following, you're always going to have that. But if you're starting out, I see some guys who have channels that are starting out. One guy in my old stomping ground of Singapore, for example, I've been observing his channel for a few weeks now, a week or so. And he's bringing out a pretty pricey collection, and I think that in that case, there's just not a low interest in those kind of things. Whereas there's some guys who are focusing in again on that sweet spot, those $500 guitars, $600 guitars, and those around $100 pedals, maybe 150, and they seem to be doing good numbers. So it's educational in that regard as well to me. So there's that. But again, I'm really encouraged by it. It's such a good thing to be able to see new YouTubers coming out and to see this kind of progress, this third wave of gear guys, and yeah, again, it's funny. Some of them are funny to me. Like I said, I always had the concept. You can go back to my earliest videos, and I always had a concept. You gotta have a background, and you make sure your background is pretty clean. So I never had. My problem always was lighting. I I lighting is something that I found difficult. I'm starting to learn, but lighting is something that I struggle with. So there's that. But again with my camera as well that I use to shoot my normal content and the new lights that I've got, I'm starting to get satisfied. I'm starting to think to myself, okay, let's start working on improving our sets. Let's build up a set. Let's do things like that. So and again, inspired by the new third wave guys, because the ones that are on it, I'm like, okay, you know, you've got an audience now. You need to step it up. So there's that. What we got here? Mickey says, in all honesty, there are way too many channels now for all of my hobbies and interests. I can't watch them all. Time is limited. Yeah, there is the dark side of that, Mickey. I could see that in an oversaturation of a genre, you know, and in which case people kind of hunker down and say, "This is my guy. I'm not interested in anybody else, and unless my guy introduces me to this next guy, that's pretty much where the circle that I'm going to stay in terms of getting that kind of information." And I always thought that with Rick Beato and Rhett Shaw and all of the other people who were kind of linked to 5 Watt World, who were kind of linked within that group. That's kind of a group, and they branched out from Rick, and then from there. And I don't know how many people really branch out from there, because heck, within the 4, 5, 6 guys within that group, you've got just about every base covered, almost. But you're not gonna find any budget guitars with those guys. I saw the gentleman from 5 Watt World talking about Strats, And he's like, yeah, I've got this one, and this other guy's got this real 56, and I've got a 57. But I know this other guy. All he does is play a Squire, and they kind of looked at each other like, imagine that. Ben says, yeah, everybody and their dog has a channel or plan on starting a channel. Yeah, and I'll attest to it. It takes. Ooh, it's a little dusty. I need to work on that. It takes. Um, you gotta be consistent. Rain. It's kind of one of those rain or shine. It's like mailman kind of things. Rain or shine, and you gotta keep it. You gotta vary it up, which means you gotta be real creative, which it weeds out. You know, everything a plan is always good on paper until it gets put into operation. You just don't know. And I didn't know either. I'm surprised when I look back at my almost 400, getting close to 400 videos that I've done in that 5, 6 years, and the consistency, and I don't repeat myself very much at all. It's just like with my music. I don't repeat myself. You won't hear two records by me that are the same, and I kind of pride myself on that. But yeah, I can understand that, Ben. Mickey says, I did watch all those guys, but not. I did watch all those guys, but not anymore. They throw out way too much content to keep up with. Yeah, again, within that, if I guess you're talking about the Rick Beato group. Yeah, they throw it out. It's out there all the time. Rick's videos, you know, are informative. They used to be a lot more informative. Now he's moved over to being kind of like the Barbara Walters of of YouTube with musicians. It's like, who is this guy not interviewing now? So a little drop off from what made him popular in the first place, but doesn't seem to really be hurting. And changing up also is a good thing too, because you do need to change up, you know. And this is a changing up year for me too. I just trying to decide what am I changing up to. But yeah, I can dig that. They throw out a lot of content, a lot of information, and sometimes it's just too much, you know. But Rick had one this week that I found interesting, which got me to thinking about the subject we'll talk later about, the music industry. But there's that. Um, yeah, again, so there's a danger too. There's too many, and then we'll stick with our guys and we won't really branch out. But there are some of them that are worth taking a look into, um, and yeah, there's that. It's funny. By the way, I'm drinking tea tonight, like really my super duper fancy tea, Chinese herbal tea tonight. Probably way too much honey in it, but it's good for my throat when I'm talking for an hour or so. Um, yeah, it's a funny thing. I've been talking recently about. Last week, I was talking briefly about these Chinese import parts, and this is a bridge tremolo system with a block that I got from Temu, uh, and I talked about it. One thing that I didn't cover, interesting enough, and thinking about China Guitar Skeptic, Mike's channel, is about fake parts. And I was it's funny. One thing would trigger another thought. So talking, listing the first wave guitar channels, I thought about Mike's channel, and I thought about fakes. I don't talk about fakes a lot. And I wondered, what is one of the most widely spread fake things out there on the internet? Uh, I'm not talking about replacement parts because this is not really, this is a copy of a Squire bridge, much cheaper, much more cheaply made. Yeah, there we go. I thought I'd get it right eventually. Much more cheaply made, and it it really is not a fake. It's just a poor copy. And but the fakes are aplenty out there. And I thought I'd do a little research and look out what was the number one faked thing out there. I'm by faked. I'm not talking about Chipsons. We talked about that. I'm really talking about. Thank you, Mickey. That's one thing. I'll get into that. That's actually number two. The number one thing, believe it or not, guys, is EMG pickups, and particularly the EMG 8185s. Those for the last 5 years have been heavily counterfeited out there on the market. And there's numerous stories of guys who go into a pawn shop to buy a guitar and they look at, oh, cool, it's got EMGs on it, And they think they're getting one over on the pawn shop guy. I got it for a steal. It's got EMGs in it, and they get it home, and something's not right, and they take it down to a luthier. Or in one guy's case, he actually contacted EMG. He says, "Hey, these are their pickups. I should be able to get them to help me service them." And they said, "Nah, buddy, I'm sorry to tell you, those are fakes." And I was surprised. EMG pickups are And the second one, as Mickey pointed out, is strings, particularly Fender strings, and I don't have a set here with me, but Slinkies. Slinkies are heavily counterfeited. Fender strings are the other ones that I saw on, believe it or not, on Temu. Temu was selling counterfeit Fender strings. So there are some counterfeits on Temu. I won't say that there are not, but strings. EMG pickups, particularly the 81s, 85s, and strings. And I thought to myself, well, wow, okay, if you go on, EMG pickups are like $280 over here. In Europe, they're like $210, $220 in the States, but they're $280 when you include the VAT and all that joy on them over here. If you get on eBay and you see a pair for $30, you gotta know, So there's that group of guys, and they gotta know that it is what it is. And it's funny, the reviews of them. Some guys actually, there are some of them, that it's like a 50-50 shot. Some of them are great. They say, hey, these are great. Of course, that's subjective. And then the rest of them are junk. So again, with Chinese parts, as I was saying last week, it's a 50-50 shot, man. It really is. It's weird. Sometimes you can get some that are just awesome. You're like, whoa, okay, all right, that works. Then you buy another pair of them and nah. But dig that. And so then there's the guys who, again, they'll go out to a pawn shop or even a secondhand shop like a Guitar Center shop, and they'll think that those are EMG. The staff is not going to check because it says EMG on it, so everybody kind of agrees to agree to not disagree, but this agrees to agree to not look into it even deeper than that. And so how many are floating around that the guys haven't even checked? They haven't checked because they are okay ones, and people, it sounds all right, so these must be. Powell, I'm going to call you Paulon. Paulon. Sorry if I'm butchering it. I buy all my strings from Sweetwater. Yeah, of course, because it's a reputable dealer. I mean, and getting into strings, why would you buy faked strings? Why would there even be a market for that? Have you ever got an old Epi? They don't do it as much as I don't think, but you start playing it and then you take your hands and it's black from the strings, and you wipe the strings down and whatever you were using is completely jacked up, and you're gonna buy a pack of those or packs. It was only $10, man, but I got 30 packs of them. Well, we don't know how he got the skin cancer, doctor. But we had to amputate all. He was a guitar player. It's a shame. No, no, I'll pass on the strings. That see, like I said, I can give you the EMG pickups if you know what it is. You're buying the fake ones. It's a 50-50 shot. Okay, trying to save money. Let me see if this works. I myself am not a fan of EMG pickups. Active pickups are not my thing. I like passive pickups. The classics. I need magnets, some wire, a little bit of copper, some silver. And go from there. But the strings, no, no way, dude. I wouldn't even conceive it. It wouldn't even, it wouldn't even pop into my head. Let me buy some fake strings from eBay or Alibaba or whatever, Temu or whatever. Now, I will admit the price of strings, surprisingly, they are inflated a bit, but they are not ridiculous. Um, they're not ridiculous. As a matter of fact, I will place my once a year order to my string maker in the UK, and I can get enough. I'm not a very heavy player. I don't change strings very often, and I always wipe my guitar downs after I practice. So I can make a set of strings last for a while. But even with that, I'm not spending more than 50, $60 for enough sets to last me for a year. And those are custom, wow, it's a custom set. So I don't consider that to be a big extravagance actually for something that I'm going to need and I'm going to want, and but I can get a really good quality. Yeah, it just makes sense that way. Matty Two Hats. Lots of fakes elixirs online. Yeah, the elixirs, those were, yeah, I saw a lot of those, man. Dig that. Yeah, and the reviews of them are not good. If you watch the YouTube videos, hey, I bought a set of fake strings. Let's test it um, against the real thing. A lot of channels have done that, and the results are never good. It's never good. There's always something in the windings of the strings, especially the heavier strings. Made in the U.S. state, yeah. They'll stamp everything. They'll stamp made in your grandma's house, baked in her oven next to the apple pie with a fly stuck in the middle of it. It'll be straight out of Guangzhou. So don't buy it. Don't do it. Don't do it. You know, I've gotten a first class education in buying these secondary parts from China. Like I said, it's hit and miss, man. And all of them are going to require some work. They'll do the job, but they all are going to require some kind of work. And so that's kind of baked in the cake. Yeah, you're getting at a cheaper price, but boy, howdy, you better know what you're doing when it comes. And so strings, something, like that, you know, you really don't want to play around with it. Like I said, I was half joking about the skin cancer, but that's a big fear of mine too. What materials are they using, to make these counterfeit strings? If they don't have the moral fortitude to not counterfeit or use somebody else's name and stamp made in the USA, I'm quite sure that they're not awake at night worrying about what materials they're using, obtaining to make said counterfeit strings, if you dig what I'm saying there. So, yeah, no, strings are, the MG pickups, like I said, yeah, but then again, like I said, you just have a market of flooded guitars out there being traded on eBay, being traded on Reverb, being traded everywhere where nobody's looked under the hood to see if these things are real or not. And like I said, if they're halfway decent, most people, unless they're doing a pickup swap, aren't going to really care. And even if they do a pickup swap, will they know that they're fake? Unless they try to move them on and then somebody calls them out. So it's a chipsing kind of thing. The counterfeits are never any good. They take away from things. I told you. You think, oh, it's not hurting anybody that I'm buying this one chipsing, but you're taking away something from somewhere. You don't think it's hurting when you buy, oh, I'm going to buy this $30 pair of fake strings, or well, not strings, but fake EMG pickups. But down the line somewhere, there's going to be a toll. There's going to be a reckoning. There's going to be a price to pay. So, I was surprised though. I was really just, number one EMG pickups, the 8185s. Number two, strings. You know, Elixirs, Fenders, uh, Slinkies. And people are buying them because if nobody bought them, there wouldn't be a market for them. You know, what is that? What is that? I always question, man. It's like people make the world go round. Prince used to say. But my goodness gracious, man, I just sometimes I don't know what's going on in some people's heads. I understand that the belts are tight, and things of that nature, and I don't begrudge that. But at the same time, there's a point where you're actually robbing from your own pocket. Um, Temu is a good example of that because, again, like I said, they flood Europe and States with these unreasonably cheap products that that nobody can compete with and even try to make a profit off of. That are mailed for free to a customer halfway across the world or more, and three-quarters of the way across the world, and they don't have to pay a VAT on them. And there's no way that a legitimate company could compete with that, like a Walmart or an eBay or, not eBay, but you know what I mean, could compete with that. Well, even eBay, yeah, they really couldn't compete with that. So that's going to drive up the cost of things. And eventually, somewhere down the line, you're going to be paying that price through something, through the inflation that it creates. And, the dollar goes from this hand to another, to another, to another. The speed of that or the slowing down of that. Being in mold, Rick Nelson. Welcome, Rick. Being in mold making here in California for more than 30 years and seeing the crappy molds brought here for 10% of our molds is a very eye-opening, yeah. And they're crappy too. The Russians sure are finding that out. They were buying CNC machines that would burn out within the first few months. They couldn't be run continuously like the Japanese and the American ones. And they had to be turned off and serviced every few hours. So yeah, just crappy stuff that they produce. The Indians had a huge thing where recently where they were completely banning products from China. They're like, we're not going to buy any of your stuff. And it was a big national wave that went through because they were just tired of this stuff. In Thailand, in my old stomping grounds in Bangkok, the new monorail system, overhead monorail system, one of the wheels came off, came down, and almost went through a taxi driver's front window shield. Luckily, it hit his front hood, a few more inches up, and it had been bye-bye, guy. So yeah, people are getting hip to it. That that it's just there's just something that's just not working there. Frederick, good evening, sir. Welcome, welcome. And yeah, and then people buy this stuff they imported in. They cut out guys that are making good molds for 30 years. Can't compete with that. And again, that's a loss of jobs, it's a loss of income, and then that income is not spent at the dentist, it's not spent at the grocery store, it's not spent at the bakery, the baker's not getting paid, so he doesn't make as much. And again, it rolls down here. The velocity of money is what I'm talking about, is what these things affect. And I'm sorry, it's a bit of a diatribe, but as you can see, it's it's a pet peeve of mine lately. And so yeah, there's that. But yeah, just dig that. Where are we at here? Okay, doing good. Um, one other small side note, completely, I guess it's a segue into the last part of our discussion tonight, which I hope you guys find interesting. Um, it's funny. By the way, what are you guys drinking out there? Again, like I said, I'm drinking Chinese herbal tea tonight with honey, so that I can keep my throat lubricated for the conversation ahead. What are you guys drinking out there tonight? I'd love to know. Um, or this morning or this afternoon, depending upon where this finds you. Um, I was going around doing my shopping rounds this weekend, and what we got here? Dr. Powell, welcome. Long time no see. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to see you. What about fake or clone pedals? The Centaur clone has been mass produced because folks can't afford to find the original. Well, that's a different thing. Nobody's taking, I have a clone copy, as you guys know. Nobody took that pedal and tried to duplicate it in terms of looking or trying to make it. In other words, it's not something, plus of all, it was a very simplistic chassis. So there's that. But there's nobody out there that makes copies of that in whatever the format. And when you get into JHS pedals, they produce clone copies that don't even look like them. They change the wording on it, change a little something. Even mine is not worded exactly clone or anything like that. So that's a different thing from taking a pickup and putting EMG on it, putting it in packaging that says made in the USA. That's quite of a big leap between that. Um, Now, when getting into folks can't afford or find the original, that's what I was saying. If you're going to buy a $30 pair of fake EMG pickups with a 50-50 shot on them, I'm not going to begrudge you on that, but be aware that there is something down the line with that. You got to later on say, hey, these aren't real. You got to disclose that. Are you going to do that? Most folks going to do that? Maybe not. That's going to hurt the buyer down the line. Did that guy deserve that to get a pair, to spend money for a guitar that he thought had EMGs in it and find out they're not real? See, it's a whole different thing. Nobody's going to give me a clone pedal and for a minute of imitation, any of them, and for a minute am I going to think that it's a real thing, because we know what the real thing looks like. And so it's just not going to work. So I was doing my shopping this week. I hope I answered that, Dr. Powell. I appreciate the question. Or at least my viewpoint on it. And I noticed a funny thing. In all the shops that I went to here in Amsterdam over the weekend, I was hearing on the BGM, the background music, nothing but 90s songs. I heard Britney Spears. I heard an Aaliyah song back and forth that I haven't heard in a long time. I heard Prince stuff, 90s stuff, like Miss Most Beautiful Girl in the World. Makes sense. A little gray though. Yeah, just like my hair. So any thoughts that come from underneath it are going to be subsequently the same, a little gray. Um, yeah, I dig it. It's just to me, there's a big leap. It's just like it's just like when you buy an Epiphone Les Paul, we know what it is. When you buy a Gibson, then you're in the then you yeah, that's funny. It's true though. My hair is getting gray, but that's all right. It comes with age and wisdom, they say. But when you're buying a Gibson, that's a whole different thing. Because then what is that? Those who practice to deceive. Blues fan. I'm having Glass California Marlowe. Ooh, nice. It's 1 degrees Fahrenheit here tonight in southern Illinois, but nice and toasty inside right now. I can dig that. It is cold here. And in Amsterdam, we were getting -3, -4 some days this last week with a wind chill factor. And I couldn't wait to get back here in the house because it's nice, and I keep it nice and toasty here for the pets as well as myself. But yeah, and tomorrow they're predicting snow here, and I can feel the cold drifting here behind me. I should have wore socks instead of these house slippers. Trying to get comfortable for the live stream. I'm gonna get pneumonia. But dig that, Marlowe. That's nice. Merlot. That's very nice. From my home state. But all the music was 90s music. And I found that to be fascinating. I found that to be absolutely fascinating. There was nothing new. And I've noticed that for a while since I've been here. Now you would think that here in the Netherlands, which is like the party scene, club scene, boom chicka music is what I call it, because it all sounds the same. God bless me, it just really does to me. Um, you know, they are the purveyors of that kind of music and new music, and you would think that you would hear a lot more new music, but you don't. Matty Two Hats, 34 degrees Celsius today in Brisbane. Boy, summer there. A nice summer day. What a lucky man you are. Dr. Powell, I'm drinking iced tea. It's 35 degrees. It's supposed to snow in mid tomorrow. Yeah, that can happen. It just needs to drop down to 30. My brother in Utah, they had a straight week of snow, and more to come. It's that time of year, but I will it really snow here in Amsterdam? It snowed pretty hard the first year I was here. I haven't seen that much, not enough that stuck for very long. So we'll see if it happens. But they're not into modern music. I don't hear any of the newest things. And I really couldn't tell you much about modern music because I don't listen to it myself. In order to get myself in the mood for what I'm going to discuss next tonight, I wanted to get myself in a music mood. And so I'm going to be talking about the 60s and Laurel Canyon. I had mentioned it last week, and I actually found the book that I was referencing, and I thought that I would read you a passage that I was talking about last week, clarify some things, and to give you a little bit of insight into the machinations of the music industry, the deep, deep, deep industry. So there's that coming up, but I found myself listening to Dear Prudence. Whenever I want to put myself in a 60s mood, that's one of the songs that it's a go-to for me. And I was listening to Dear Prudence, and it puts me in that place, man. The vibe of that song it's just entrenched in what I and I'm old enough to kind of had a little bit of that feeling. I remember in the early 70s of what the 60s were like. I was born in June of 1967 in the height of the summer of love. So I am definitely a summer of love child, absolutely, without question. But it put me in a mood to go back and to think about a particular part of Los Angeles, Laurel Canyon. And one of the things that, of course, I mentioned last week, but one of the things that had me thinking about talking about that, or rehashing, or at least getting a little deeper into it, because I know you guys like this weirdo stuff, and we're about to get this rabbit hole stuff, and boy howdy, put on your parachutes because we are about to dive down a big nasty one. Put on your splunking gear, put on your climbing boots, man, because you're gonna need them. Um, but the fact that you know musically that period of time has such lasting effects to today. We're talking 50 years later or more, 60 years later in some cases. And the rock music, the pop music, the things that were generated at that time, the reverberations of it still can be felt in the music industry to how they do business, as well as how we perceive music, what we consider to be excellence, which is another reason why I don't think these Dutch guys, when they're in the shops, they're not listening to the new stuff. No, they're listening to the older stuff. uh, because it's better, in my opinion. It really is in a lot of cases, without any questions. The stuff from the period that we're going to talk about tonight, musically, from a compositional standpoint, is superior to most stuff today. Like jazz was superior to it before that. So let us delve into something I'm going to read to you tonight. Um, I want to talk about Laurel Canyon tonight to finish up tonight. I want to read a little bit from a book um, by Dave McGowan, where he was writing about some very interesting things that he dug up in Laurel Canyon. And all this stuff has been fact checked. And from things that I know myself, from history and things that I read before, a lot of it rings true. Um, there are references to that he notes, and so you can look those up. So it's pretty well referenced a piece that he wrote, a book that he wrote. But I have a strong tie to Laurel Canyon myself. I grew up in Southern California, as you know, in Los Angeles, well, actually in Windsor Hills, California. And one of the shortcuts, if you didn't want to take the 405 freeway into the valley, one of the shortcuts on the surface streets is you could take Laurel Canyon up, goes over and down into Sepulveda, and you're in the valley. And going up, it's a very windy, twisty road, but much like the Griffin Park area of Los Angeles, it's a vegetative area, very scenic, depending upon the time of year, sometimes really beautiful in the fall, full of older, houses. During the daytime, it gives off a rustic 60s kind of vibe. It really does, especially the country store at the bottom of Laurel Canyon as you're going up. Starting from there going up, you really do get that vibe. At night, this is just for me, from the time that I was driving from 16 on until, I left Los Angeles, or even a little bit after that. Um, Driving Laurel Canyon at night, these are just my impressions. At night, it took on a very sinister kind of vibe. It really did. When I drove up there, through there at night, I wanted to, when you're coming up on the valley side, it's pretty well lit. When you're going down on the Laurel Canyon side and you're feeding down to Santa Monica Boulevard, it can get pretty dark and spooky, and in a sinister kind of way. So I worked, and then I found myself going up there daily because in college, in between my freshman and sophomore, no, somewhere in that time, freshman, sophomore, we'll just say, for argument's sake, period of time in the summer, I was looking for jobs, and I got a job as an assistant for a guy who was in the business, who's in the industry. He actually had a house up on Laurel Canyon, at the very top of Laurel Canyon, right before it goes down into the valley. He lived right next door to a guy named Robin Leach, who had a very famous TV show called The Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous at one point, very popular show. And he lived next door to him. I was working as an assistant to this guy. And so I was going up there night and day quite a bit. So I have a connection to that area for that summer, to that area that's pretty strong. I know it pretty well. So I give you that little bit of trying to paint a picture for those of you who've never been there, have never seen it, what it's like. And let's talk about how Laurel Canyon became the epicenter of the music business in Los Angeles. It was really the epicenter. Mulholland Drive has an eerie vibe. Yeah, Mulholland Drive, absolutely. Griffin Park Drive You take that Griffin to drive up, and you go through the tunnels to go up to the observatory. I don't know how it is now, but back in the day, they still had the original tunnel from the 40s going through there, and it could get spooky up there. It was something. All those ways, and I'm, sitting here talking about reminiscing on them. I can still feel it, or what the sensation of what it was like to drive during the 70s. I'm sorry, in that case it would be the mid 80s, early 80s, 16, yeah, and 84, 85, and driving up through there, 90s. It was something. And it was quite a place to be. I was there in 2010, Wild Energy. Yeah, it's got a wild energy to it. And so then that's the sentiment that I want to get across to you guys. So I painted this picture here. You got kind of a feel of where I'm going to talk about. Now, during that time in the 60s, without any question, the big music centers in the United States was New York, Memphis, and no change from today. God, I can't think of it now. God, that's so bad. Oh, guys, anyway, none of them were Los Angeles. And that's embarrassing. The third, I should roll off my tongue. Nashville, sorry, guys. So Memphis, New York, and Nashville. And LA really wasn't very strongly on the scene, really. It wasn't a driving factor, actually, to be honest. The Brill Building still is in New York. Publishing firms were still really primarily in New York, where the money was. The lawyers were there, most of the firms that handled contracts were there. The mobs that ran those organizations were there. So it was a very East Coast kind of dominant thing. Why did that suddenly change all of a sudden in the mid 60s and really blossomed out of Laurel Canyon? In the first week of August of 1964, U.S. warships under the command of U.S. Navy Admiral George Stephen Morrison came under attack while patrolling Vietnam's Tonkin Gulf. This event, subsequently dubbed the Tonkin Gulf Incident, resulted in the immediate passing by the U.S. Congress of the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, which in turn quickly led to the Vietnam War. So here we have an admiral, a Navy admiral by the name of George Stephen Morrison, whose boat was the focal point of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and that led to the Vietnam War. And this is a very interesting thing. This would be of significant historical, it would be of a significance in historical terms all in of itself. But what makes it even more interesting is the son of this man. See, this guy had a son, and his name was Jim Morrison. So let's talk about Jim Morrison. Let me scroll down, guys. I'm not going to read you everything, but I'm going to pick out the juicy bits. So while this was happening in the Gulf of Tonkin, meanwhile, elsewhere in the world in those early months of 65, so now we moved into 65, I'm sorry, the Gulf of Tonkin was 65. A new scene is just beginning to take shape in the city of Los Angeles, in a geographically and socially isolated community known as Laurel Canyon, a heavily wooded, rustic, serene, yet vaguely ominous slice of LA nestled in the hills. I like that, vaguely ominous. That's quite true. Nestled in the hills that separates the Los Angeles basin from the San Fernando Valley. Musicians, singers, and songwriters suddenly began to gather as though summoned there by some unseen Pied Piper. Within months, the hippie flower child movement is begotten there, along with the new style of music that will provide the soundtrack for that record, for that tumultuous period of time, the second half of the 1960s. One of the earliest on the Laurel Canyon Sunset Strip scene is Jim Morrison. The enigmatic, I'm sorry guys, enigmatic, that's the one word that always typos. I'm going to pass by. Lead singer of The Doors. Jim would quickly become one of the most iconic, controversial, critically acclaimed, and influential figures to take up residence in Laurel Canyon. Um, Interesting. So we have Gulf of Tonkin happening, and I wish I could show you the picture, but we have Jim Morrison on the deck of his father's ship around 1964. Again, a very short hair, clean cut, very Wally from Leave It to Beaver kind of clothes, standing next to his father in his admiral uniform. Within a year's time, we have him showing up on the Sunset Strip, much longer hair, now anti-war, long, change of clothes, just a complete 180 from the guy that he was a year earlier, and specifically being tied to such a significant figure as this. You would think that the other musicians who were supposedly anti-war themselves sitting around would say, hey, dude, isn't your dad the one who started, and that would not, back then within that group, that would be a faux pas. But no, nobody questioned it. Nobody said anything about it. Nobody really wrote about it. Nobody really dug into that. And I find that interesting. It's the things that people don't talk about that are always the things that are interesting, worth talking about. So, curiously enough, though, the self-proclaimed Lizard King has another claim to fame as well. He is the son, as it happens, of the aforementioned Admiral George Stephen Morrison. And so it is that even while the father is actively conspiring is his word, not mine, to fabricate an incident that will be used to massively accelerate the war effort, the son is positioning himself to become an icon of the hippie anti-war crowd. Nothing unusual about that, I suppose. It is, a small world and all. And it is not as if Jim Morrison's story is in any way unique. So yeah, there's something there. That is what I consider to be a coinkydink. it's a, what is that? I'm a detective now. I'm not allowed to believe in coincidences. Isn't that a favorite famous line? And me looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, maybe he rebelled against his dad so much that he felt the need to go off and start one of the most famous rock and roll bands of all time. Okay, all right, okay, sure. Let's read on. During the early years of its heyday, Laurel Canyon's father figure is the rather eccentric personality known as Frank Zappa. We talked about Zappa last week. Though he and his various Mothers of Invention lineups would never attain the commercial success of the band headed by Jim Morrison, Frank would be a hugely influential figure among his contemporaries. Living in an abode dubbed the Long Cabin, which sat right in the heart of Laurel Canyon at the crossroads of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Lookout Mountain Avenue, know it very well. It's not there anymore. Zappa, that place. But Zappa will play host to virtually every musician who passes through the canyon in the mid to late 1960s. He will also discover and sign numerous acts to his various Laurel Canyon-based record labels. Many of these acts, like Captain Beefheart and Larry Wildman Fletcher, and some of them became even more famous than him, like the rocker Alice Cooper. Let's go on. So, now it's very interesting that although Zappa crew prefers the label Freak, Zappa would never make it a secret of the fact that he held nothing but contempt for the hippie culture that he would help create and which he himself would surround himself with. Well, that's interesting. Why would Frank Zappa, what would be in his upbringing or his character or something that he would hold contempt for the very culture that he is synonymous with? That's a very strange thing. So why is that? Given that Zappa was, by many accounts, a pro-military, rigidly authoritative control freak. Well, most musicians are in his position, so nothing really weird there. But in case you're wondering about his background, uh, his father was assigned to a chemical welfare specialist in Edgewood Arsenal, Baltimore, Maryland. Edgewood is, of course, the longtime home of America's chemical welfare program, MK Ultra operations, yada, yada, yada. So this is where Frank Zappa grew up. He grew up on a military installation because his father was in the military. Very interesting. The family later moved to Lancaster, then near Edwards Air Force Base, and things of that nature, moving around like military families tend to do. And then suddenly he finds himself in Laurel Canyon. So there is that. The other big guy who moved in and became one of the father figures in this movement was Papa John Phillips of the Mamas and Papas, that group. And he was also a big part of the counterculture spread across the United States. He wrote San Francisco, Be Sure to Wear Flowers in Your Hair, played at the Monterey Pop Festival, and was part of the Haight Ashbury phenomenon in the 1967 Summer of Love in San Francisco. He opened his mansion up in Laurel Canyon to many people like Mama Cass Elliott, Abigail Folger, famously Charlie Manson as well. And this shouldn't be a big surprise that his background is his father was John Edmund Andrew Phillips, the son, which was a U.S. military captain, and a mother who was also involved in elite military prep schools in Washington, D.C. So here we have another guy who comes from a background of the military-industrial complex. Second, and these are the two big father figures, guys. Okay? And, of course, we've thrown in Morrison as well, so we've got three there. Okay, that's interesting. That's strange. What's up with that? Anyway, let's move on to another guy named Mr. Stephen Stills. We all know him of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young fame. He wrote a lot of the most enduring anthems of the 60s generation, for what it's worth. And certainly was a big part of that counterculture movement. However, before his arrival in Laurel Canyon, Stephen Stills was the product of yet another career military family. Number 4. Raised in Texas, spent a lot of time in Costa Rica, Panama, Central America. His father was educated at military bases and at elite military academies. Had, again, a very abrasive, other people described him as having an abrasive, authoritative personality. Of course, coming from that kind of background, I can understand that. Very interesting. Very strange. So here we have another icon of the early LA music industry and up there in Laurel Canyon at the same time, who has a family background heavily in the military. 4 guys so far. That's 4 guys. I could bore you with this, but it turns out that most of these guys and gals had family involved in the military, the U.S. military. I'm sorry, what we got here? Okay, nothing. David Cosby is much more than just the son of Mayor Floyd Dallenfield Cosby. David Van Cortlandt Cosby, as it turns out, is the scion of the closely intertwined Van Cortlandt, Van Scier, and Van Rensselaer families. And while you're probably thinking the Van Who families, I can assure you that if you plug those names over at Wikipedia, you can spend a pretty fair amount of time reading up on the power wielded by this clan for about 2 1/4 centuries or so. The Cosby family tree includes Supreme Court justices, senators, congressmen, senators, assemblymen, governors, Revolutionary and Civil War generals, signers of the Declaration of Independence, members of the Continental Congress, um, and more than a few, of course, by association, high-ranking Masons. Stephen, um, his one of his relatives was a very high-ranking Mason. David Cosby is a direct descendant of Alexander Hamilton. So his family is what they call a blue blood American family, a Mayfair family. You know, they can tie their roots all the way back to the original colonies. He's not and was not a poor man, is the point of this. He was a very well, he wasn't some bummy musician down on his luck out of Texas, made his way, hiked his way on a bus to LA in order to make it in the music business. No, no, no. Not the case with David Cosby at all. Not the case at all. Not the case at all. I'm sorry, there was a comment here. Let me see. It is, of course, the Masons. Yeah. Well, you know, if you're talking, you know, yeah, if you're talking about families like that, then yeah, that's like you got to be in the Boy Scouts as a kid. If you're in one of those families, you're automatically in that club. You know, it's a big club, but we're not members of it. Like Carlin used to say. So he's a pretty deep cat, and you have Jackson Browne, and he writes, I'm sure you're getting bored with this as I am, but I will note that Jackson Browne, we all know Jackson Browne, she's gotta be someone's baby tonight, gonna shine, I love that song. Yeah, I love that song. Also is the product of a career military family. Browne's father was assigned to post-war Reconstruction work in Germany, which likely means that he was in the employ of the OSS, a precursor of the CIA. So there we have Jackson Browne. Mike Nesmith of the Monkees. Hey, we're the Monkees. Again, the story is told that this was an open, casting, and they brought these three guys together, one really short, one really tall, and everything in between, and put these guys together, and somehow or another they formed a band that could go out and eventually play, which they could eventually play their own instruments. As a matter of fact, Jimi Hendrix was an opening act for the Monkees, believe it or not, at one point. That's a true story. But that story is false as well. It's a false narrative. That's not what it was about, because Mike Nesmith inherited a family fortune estimated at $25 million, and $25 million in 1965 would be like $150 million today. Okay, seriously, and I'm not exaggerating that. And Graham Parsons, we know about Graham Parsons, also, again, military family. So it just goes down the list here. As it so goes, I'll finish here. As it so goes, as one scrolls through the roster of Laurel Canyon superstars, what one finds, far more often than not, are the sons and daughters of the military intelligence complex and the sons and daughters of extreme wealth and privilege. Oftentimes, you'll find both rolled into one convenient package. Every once in a while, you'll stumble across a child actor like Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees, or an eccentric prodigy like Van Dyke Parks. You might also get different folks like James Taylor, who spent time in 2 different mental institutions in Massachusetts before hitting the Laurel Canyon scene. Joni Mitchell, I can also add to that group of people who didn't have a military background, but was also a big part of that scene. All these folks gathered nearly simultaneously during the along the narrow winding roads of Laurel Canyon. They came from across the country, from Washington, from Canada, from England, from Texas. even from Germany. And they came, even though at the time there was no music industry in Los Angeles. This is a big takeaway where we're going to stop tonight at, is him pointing out that there was no music business in Los Angeles at that time. They came even though there was no live music scene to speak of either. The Sunset Strip was dead. It was dead until the Whiskey Go-Go and a lot of those clubs generated from this wave of these guys started having live bands and started that wave of those things happening. It was not that kind of party on Sunset Boulevard prior to '65. That didn't exist. You had Capitol Records, which was the biggest thing happening on the West Coast. The house that Nat King Cole built. I recorded myself at Capitol Records. Me and Jacques. I think I told you guys that story. But there was really nothing significant above and beyond that. Smaller labels, things like that, but nothing happening. My Uncle Carlton will tell you about that. He would spend most of his time on the East Coast. And at some point, the West Coast became happening. But I submit to you that this was an operation to create a music scene. It was through individuals that had backgrounds where you could see there was a certain level of control by one or two more interested parties, government and dark government, in order to make this happen. For exactly that reason, to create a counter message for whatever reasons. Well, we know what came of that. The riots and the demonstrations and eventually Berkeley. But, it was a setup is what I'm trying to say. It smells to me like a setup. It would, of course, I'll read a little bit more. It would, of course, make sense these days for an aspiring musician to venture out to Los Angeles. But in those days, the center of music were Nashville, Memphis, and New York. Yeah, it wasn't the industry that drew the Laurel Canyon crowd, you see, but rather the Laurel Canyon crowd that transformed Los Angeles into the epicenter of music it is today. To what then do we attribute the unprecedented gathering of future music superstars in the hills above Los Angeles? What was it that inspired them to all head out west? What was it? What was it indeed? All right. So there's that. So Ben says, nothing is what it seems it is it? These MFers have been playing us all our lives. And that's the point of it, guys. We have this nostalgia. Ben Allmark, the world is their stage, yes. And as somebody put, Frank Zappa, interesting enough, who I'll quote, said, and one day they'll pull up the props and you'll see the real brick wall behind the scenes. But that's, when you read through this book, and he breaks it down, oh gosh, the nefarious things that were going on, the fact that there was at the top of Laurel Canyon at that time a military base that primarily shot, for a better word, propaganda films or films of that nature, war films, things of that nature. Stanley Kubrick, of all people, at one point worked up there. That's where the big rumor that the moon landing video was actually shot on a stage. They always say that, but they don't point out that the stage that it was supposedly shot by Kubrick on, if you guys are familiar with that little bit of a tale, that stage that it was shot on was actually located in Laurel Canyon, up there at that film studio. This is a fact. You can look it up. So yeah, man, a lot of weird stuff happening up there. But again, as was pointed out, one of the big takeaways is that we've been fed this line that it was organic and it was all love and flowers and it was organic and that, and then this, just it was this commingling of just coincidences that made this happen, that caused this burgeoning, industry. Let's talk about David Geffen, by the way, how it was Geffen Records that was set up, that was doing most of the distribution of this stuff. Most of these guys at one point were signed to David Geffen. It's one of the reasons the Eagles, Don Henley to this day hates David Geffen, arguments between them, but they were all part of that. Yep, and unfortunately, it's looking to me like we're about to give to them like the good sheeple we are. Rick Nelson. Boom, you nailed this one. Ben Allmark, sorry to be a bummer, but that's what I'm saying. Well, I'm not trying, this is a bummer story, dude. Yeah, there ain't no roses to be painted on the ass of this one. No, no. This is showing you that it's been a setup, man. It's been a mind F since, since day one, man. It's what they call controlled opposition. Geffen became a billionaire off of it. But there was no Geffen Records. Geffen Records was directly tied to Laurel Canyon scene. I went to Geffen Records once when I was working for this particular guy as a assistant. He had me drop something off. So I went to the offices there, up there on Sunset, the Geffen offices. Mickey Newman, yeah, Geffen's worth $8 billion. Yeah, he's $8 billion, yeah. Because he grew from that Laurel Canyon. So somehow money got funneled in so that he could sign these people who nobody heard of before, but somehow he was able to create a label that created this scene and generated billions of dollars. Movies that came out of Geffen. They started producing new movies like RoboCop, things like that. Yeah, man, dig that. An industry was born from this. One that I submit to you is controlled by the people who financed it, who set it up, and made it happen. It's one of the dark underpinnings of Hollywood. Deals with the devil. Well, we don't even have to get into that aspect of these. Are just the hard fact of the fact that these. I've read to you the backgrounds of the significant figures, and I cut through a lot of them. Deals with the government, yeah, even truer, even better said. Wild stuff, yeah. They're all connected in one way to the military-industrial complex. All of those guys, with a few exceptions. Like I said, I point out Joni Mitchell as being one of the rare exceptions, but she was a true artist. She actually was the story. I think she was brought in because she really gave good cover to the other ones. Well, let's talk about Joni. How she had to give up her daughter for adoption, and she's been out on the road, and then she got on Canadian TV, and she built up a following, and now here she is in Laurel Canyon. She was a true talent. So it led a little. Not saying that some of these other guys weren't talented, but some of them, they couldn't really. Some of them could play like the Monkees, and they couldn't play, and then eventually they learned how to. They had the LA Wrecking Crew doing their records for them, so there was that's the Milli Vanilli stuff. You think it's the Monkees that were playing on those records. It was actually Neil Diamond writing the songs and the LA Wrecking Crew playing the music. Until the live shows came up and they had to play on stage. And that was in the beginning of variance, quality. So there was a lot of shenanigans that were being deceptions just on a business side, just on a flat out business side. That can be pointed to now in hindsight that we can look at. And we can, again, read the records of these people. I mean, heck, Mamas and the Papas, even that's reaching into now, because the granddaughter of John Phillips, the daughter of Mackenzie, his daughter, Mackenzie Phillips, her daughter, married homeboy from that 70s show, Danny Matheson. And she just recently divorced, had a kid with him, a couple of kids. And she recently divorced him. He's off to jail for 30 years to life. So there's a lot of ominous, deep, dark, things that go out with these folks. I talked about how buying fakes, it has ripples in the velocity of money. These kind of actions that these people were taking, talk about deals with the devil on the spiritual side, they have repercussions that are far-reaching. Out, in the karma of people not even born yet, or during the time that this stuff was being set up. That's a fact. I could go through like Graham Parsons. I could go through the list of musicians who passed away. You know, we have the usual list of mysterious deaths. Graham Parsons, if you guys are familiar with who that is, you should be. You know, the father of country, the father of the Eagles before there was an Eagles, the father of country, you know, of what not country, but what I call like desert rock, like that kind of thing. Graham Parsons is a guy I could point to who definitely they benefited from the death clause on that guy, and he went out exactly in that way. Here in Canada right now, Ben writes, a right-wing news reporter politely asked our deputy prime minister a normal question and was tackled and arrested by the RCMP Gestapo this past week. Hard to watch. Well, you had Trudeau up there, you know, was Lewinsky, the guy from the Ukraine, in the audience, putting a medal around a Nazi, a real Nazi, not, you know, the Disney Nazis in that last Indiana Jones movie, but a real did dirt, should have been hung a long time ago Nazi. And then, you know, oh, well, we didn't mean it. So, she's a big worldwide member, of course. Yeah, that's the club. That's the club before mentioned club. So dig that, man. What's going on in Canada? All caught here on camera and here on YouTube. Yeah, and it's for real. In the UK, you know, if you talk about what a man is and what a woman is, and you have any variance from what the world says they are, then you can lose everything. Rick Nelson, I love others like you. See these things, buddy. 11 years apart, but seeing these things alike. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Now, I've been, like I said, I've been down the rabbit hole, lived in the rabbit hole, escaped the rabbit hole for a long time now, and have seen enough to know that that there's a lot of stuff that ain't gonna come out in the wash. There's some things that are just too dirty that there's just no way you can clean it up. Her grandfather was a known Nazi. Yeah, funny how that always ties back to what was going on with the Nazi. You know, the Nazi party was not a political party. It was an occult society. It was an occult society. Why do you think you see, I was mentioning Indiana Jones, why do you think all those stories about looking for the Spear of Longinus or the Spear of Destiny, more commonly known, or looking for the Lost Ark, or why all those stories, which are true stories, why Hitler was really doing that? What was that about? It's because they were occultists. They were occultists. It was the occult society. You know. And so, born out of Madame Blavatsky's teachings, that again, another offshoot of that, and I think about it, would be Aleister Crowley as well. All that stuff, Nazism has roots and all that stuff. You know, and all these things have ties into the music business. I started out talking about how I was listening to Dear Prudence, but I find it very interesting that the Beatles put Aleister Crowley on their infamous album cover for Sgt. Pepper's. He's in that grouping of photos of famous people. Aleister Crowley's in there. Why is that? See, there's all these occult ties into everything. You know, you either bury your head in the sand and you say, I don't believe that and I don't accept that. And so, but there's sure enough there, even as a stone cold atheist, that you could dig your teeth into just on the mere facts of the matter. Why is it that all the main musicians that came out from that period of time had family ties to the U.S. military industrial complex? And why did they all gather in the summer of 1965 in one location? They were absolutely occultists, Rick Nelson says. Yes. Yeah, dig that. So, you'd have to bury your head in the sand either way in order, either way, okay, let's put the occult stuff aside. Let's just, again, look at the bare facts. If you don't accept that, then you're burying your head in the sand. You don't want to hear about it. Either way, you're setting yourself up for deception or to be marketed to in any way for any kind of deception. But that's not what that was about. Summer of Love stuff. Where did the acid, where did the LSD come from the Summer of Love up in, where did this, who was generating this stuff? Well, it turns out it was a guy who had had ties with the military industrial complex. And we all know his story. And then it was, it was an experiment. Let's take this LSD out. We were trying it on housewives. You can see YouTube videos of this 50s house or 60s housewife throwing out LSD experiments. And let's take this and put it out on the market, and let's see what we can do and how it would affect in a broader sense. So let's take San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury area. Let's put in, psychedelics and musics and bands and stuff like that, and messages and stuff like that, and let's see what happens. And boy, howdy. Mr. Crowley. Yeah, you got, again, there you got Ozzy Osbourne talking about Mr. Crowley. You got Black Sabbath, guys like Tony Iommi, who were occultists. You got Jimmy Page, one of the biggest occultists of all time. He bought Aleister Crowley's house. He bought his house. And was doing all kinds of rituals up in there, which I don't recommend. So, and then that ties us again. We have another occultist from the Philosophical Society, Madame Blavatsky, her society, her writings, which, by the way, came from, her own words, came from a third-party spirit, with ties into the music industry, which have ties into Laurel Canyon. It all ties, which has ties to the Nazis through the military-industrial complex in the families. They didn't hang all the Nazis. Some of them, like Indiana Jones 5, was very poorly. I saw that. I'm talking about Indiana Jones because I finally watched Indy Jones 5 last night. I put it off because I just didn't want to do it because I heard it was so bad. And actually, it wasn't a bad movie. But they always try to sprinkle in a little bit of history, true history in there for the initiated to pick up on. And one of the points they were saying is that not all Nazis got hung. Some of them actually got exported to the States and were doing the rocket program, which we know that's true too. Ben Allmark. Tom Bukovac, famous Nashville session man and YouTube, admitted he's attended Bohemian Grove nonsense and tells us not to believe what we hear about that place. I questioned him but got nowhere. He wouldn't go there. Well, if he'd been to Bohemian Grove, I don't know if you guys know what that is. It's a little conclave that the rich and famous meet at, pretty close to San Francisco, somewhere up in that area, Northern California. That's a fact. They have pictures of there where they have a center meeting area that they've carved a wooden structure to look like an owl. Look up what an owl is in the occultist meaning. So that's a hint and a half right there. But you can't hide it. You get this freaking 60-foot freaking owl in the meeting of where you all gathered together to have your meetings. And we know the owl is Moloch. So, it's like, come on, dude. What is that? I talked about Cat Williams, and one of the things she said, one of the things that people who know these things, their biggest job is to pretend like they don't know about it. That's one of their biggest jobs to do. Is I have no idea what you're talking about. But, you got this 60-foot statue of Moloch. At least it used to be there. I don't know what the Bee Gees stomping on these days, if it's still even happening, but back in the day, the old school Bohemian Grove had a big ass statue of Moloch, which is an owl. walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, pretty good chance it's a duck. So there's that. So anyway, where are we at? Okay, we're done. I think that was an interesting topic tonight. Looking at the dark, ominous, deep, ugly underpinnings of the music industry, and how even things that we thought like the hippie movement and the counterculture movement might actually have been controlled opposition movements. Not very well have been. Pretty sure that they were. And that old Summer of Love hippie feeling stuff was nothing but a big social experiment that was very controlled. And the music scene in LA was set up so that they could have ultimate control over even the older scenes in New York, Memphis, and Nashville. So somebody else could take over that industry. So thanks, guys. This week coming up, I will put out something on my regular show, depending upon if whether Fern has my order in for my tuners. I'm still waiting for my other parts caster to get done. I'd love to play it, show it off. We will be back here again next Sunday. It allows the government to bring in new laws. Yeah, of course. That's also part of the program as well. Truth hiding in plain sight, but you have to eyes to see. See, you can only be deceived if you're uninitiated, if you don't see what it is. I so love this post. You might get banned for telling so much truth. No, I'm just, hey, again, I'm reading from what is proven history. So the facts are there. You can either explain it away or you can dig what it is that I'm trying to say. But that is the fact of the matter. That is the fact of the matter. All right, guys, until the next one, you take care. I will say Oyasumi Nasai to my Japanese watchers. You know who you are. And I will wish all you guys a safe and prosperous week. Man, we went from Chinese knockoffs to full-blown and covering 60 music engineers. Yeah. It's always an interesting ride on this channel, guys. And I thank you so much for taking it with me. You guys take care. I will see you. Bye-bye.